West Denver. Sleep deprived and heavily caffeinated.
All right, let's do this then.
This is the Jeff and Bill Show.
I don't understand why this is an issue.
They don't always agree, but hey, at least they have coffee.
Coffee.
And each other.
I love you, man.
God help us.
I want to bless him. We need all the help we can get.
Now here's Jeff Hunt and Bill Thorpe. The Jeff and Bill Show on News Talk 710 KNUS.
Six a.m. in the Mile High City on this Tuesday, August 12th, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned into the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights and hottest takes from the right, left, and center. We're going to kick it off very quick this morning because I want to use all the time I can. The other day I posted on X that marijuana ruined Colorado and the commercialization of it ruined the state. And friend of the program, Brandon Work over at Free State, Colorado, said, Jeff, you're wrong about this one. And I said, Brandon, you up for a debate? He said, sure. But like any good red-blooded American, he's got to work. So he's got to go to work here soon. So he's going to join us bright and early, 6 a.m., classic conservative libertarian debate, kicking it off at 6 a.m. because, of course, that's exactly what we do at 6 a.m.
Oh, of course.
We wake up and debate. Yes,
what can we debate about?
Let's debate.
What can we disagree about this morning?
So he's going to be joining us here in a second. I want to give as much time
Excellent.
Before he actually has to go off and be an adult, unlike the rest of us who sit here and talk on the radio.
I know this isn't a real job. I tell people all the time, like, what do you do? I'm like, I don't have a real job. I'm sorry. Doesn't matter what you do.
I talk about my
yours is better.
feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's going to join us. It's going to be great. Classic. I've debated this thing 3 times. CPAC debate, Turning Point USA debate, and Channel 4 debate on marijuana. So I feel passionate about this. Brandon does as well. So don't miss it. Now it's time for News and Comment with Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, News and Comment.
Hey, good Tuesday morning. 58 and clear, expecting a high of 88 today. This portion of the news sponsored by Pastor Camp Heating and Air Conditioning at 303-777-1234 to learn more about special savings opportunities on Lennox equipment. Our top story, the White House expected to release official trip details today for Friday's meeting between DJT and Russian leader Putin in Alaska. Ukrainian President Zelensky will not be part of the meeting. DJT says that he will call Zelensky and the Euro leaders after the meeting. A former Democrat Intelligence Committee staffer turned whistleblower informed the FBI that Adam Schiff, Shifty Schiff, personally authorized leaking classified Russia information to undermine DJT. What a surprise. Shifty Schiff is as dirty as we thought he was. John Solomon, Just the News on Hannity.
Listen, this whistleblower literally sat in a meeting, he tells the FBI, where Adam Schiff authorized the leaking of classified secrets to dirty up Donald Trump and to try to build towards either a select committee in Congress or a special prosecutor. This whistleblower was a career intelligence officer. He had worked for the House Intelligence Committee, Democrat staff for a dozen years when he came forward to the FBI. He gave 4 interviews. He gave very specific information to the FBI, and nothing happened. Why? Because the Justice Department simply decided to take a pass. How many times have we sat around in the last decade and heard, we're going to get to the bottom of that classified leak, and then a few months later, we couldn't get to the bottom of that classified leak. In the case of Adam Schiff, they got to the bottom of some classified leaks, but the Justice Department chose not to act. So
now we hopefully will hear more about that greaseball. Investigators say that a 21-year-old man from Littleton was killed in a crash on I-25 near milepost 192 in Lone Tree Sunday night. He was hit by a Toyota RAV4 and then thrown from the bike. And 2 other vehicles hit him as he lay on the ground. Initial reports indicate he was not wearing a helmet. 18-year-old Victor Zavala is facing charges after a weekend crash in Brighton on US 85 at the intersection of East 168th. On Sunday evening, he reportedly turned into oncoming traffic while attempting to turn onto East 168th, seriously injuring a driver in another vehicle. Investigators say the teen had been driving recklessly before the crash and showed signs of intoxication. He was booked into the Adams County Jail. Some D.C. residents are opposed to 47's decision to deploy the National Guard and take control of the city's police. More than 100 protesters rallied near the White House on Monday, with some denouncing the decision as fascist. A few hours later, 2 blocks away, a shooting occurred. According to ABC, the victim was not breathing when they rushed him to the hospital. Yeah, they don't need to clean up D.C., do they? Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum is pushing back against U.S. military looking to rid the cartels. She said she won't allow American troops to operate on Mexican soil. I mean, why would she want to, get rid of the cartels? She has it under control. Tells you everything you need to know about who really runs Mexico. A federal judge has rejected the DOJ's request to unseal grand jury materials from Ghislaine Maxwell's case. The DOJ is already seeking similar records in cases tied to Epstein, but asked the courts to hold off on rulings until August 14th. In Maxwell's case, the judge says most of the information is already public and doesn't meet the threshold for historical or public interest. It is 56 in Lone Tree as the sun rises, 57 in Westminster, 58 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue on Tuesday. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Your KNUS forecast for the Denver metro area calls for very pleasant early Tuesday morning. Early morning readings 50s. Highs today a little warmer, back to near average, but not nearly as hot as they'll be in another 24 to 36 hours. Temps today, mid and upper 80s. Some haze and smoke in our skies, lows near 60. Upper 90s for highs Wednesday and Thursday. Weather is a service of L&L Heating and Air Conditioning. For quick, trustworthy, and dependable service, call L&L Heating and Air Conditioning at 720-851-1691. Visit them online at bestdenverhvac.com. That's bestdenverhvac.com. You'll be comfortable with L&L. I'm meteorologist Mark Huer in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Brandon is with Free States, Colorado. Great blog. He hosts a podcast show. Very talented. And yesterday, I posted, or a few days ago, I posted, Mr. President. The president is considering reclassifying marijuana as a less dangerous drug. So he wants to move it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 drug. And I just posted, Mr. President, I could probably help here. Colorado commercialized marijuana, and it destroyed our state. It is a total loser. And Brandon responded just going, Jeff, you're wrong on this one. And I said, Brandon, you up for a debate? Because I love debating this issue. I love debating lots of issues, but this one in particular, I'm passionate about. And he said, sure. And so he joins us bright and early. Brandon, thank you so much for being on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
I appreciate the opportunity, guys. I'm a big fan of the show and love watching it, so real honored to be on.
Yeah, hopefully this is one of many to come. Brandon, what did I get wrong? I'll throw it to you.
Well, I get it. Marijuana is an easy scapegoat for people here in Colorado. A lot of people see that as a turning point when Colorado kind of started going the wrong way. And I'd say there's some other issues involved that really caused Colorado to move in the wrong direction. Primarily, the Democratic control of our state legislature, which really happened in 2004, 10 years before marijuana became legal. We had Jared Polis, Pat Stryker, Tim Gill, and the other guy create the blueprint model here, the Gang of Four, and used a lot of money to create a lot of 501c4s and PACs to really shift Colorado's political landscape, where the Democrats took control of our state legislature back in 2004, and I would say it's downhill from there. We've seen pro-crime policies put criminals back on the streets, making Colorado one of the most dangerous places out here. We've seen car theft skyrocket. We've seen sanctuary state policies that have really caused serious issues. And I would also say we had mail-in voting, which really started in 2014, that unfortunately I think has moved Colorado in the wrong direction as well. So, Jeff, I appreciate your perspective on things, but I have to say there's some other issues at play that are more fundamental and more structural to the changes we've seen in the Colorado political landscape other than marijuana.
Now, that is Brandon Work. He is a host of Free State Colorado, joining Jeff and Bill live. Just to start off, as far as, setting terms, Brandon, you referred to Colorado going the wrong way. Can you just briefly, in a thumbnail, encapsulate what you mean by Colorado going the wrong way? And, Jeff, do you agree with Brandon's definition of Colorado going the wrong way? How do you define Colorado going the wrong way?
Colorado's gone the wrong way because we've seen policies that have enabled criminals to take advantage of the system and create an unsafe environment for people to raise their families. We've seen an increasing cost of living, a lack of affordability, and other policies that have stifled our business community. We've seen attacks on oil and gas. We've seen restrictions on our right to keep and bear arms, which I do have to say is related to the crime issue. We've seen horrible policies coming out of our state legislature that have just weakened the social fabric of our state and empowered the bad guys. And unfortunately, that's where we're at.
Okay, now, Jeff, do you agree with that? And if so, how do you fit marijuana into Colorado going the wrong way?
Yeah, with regards to crime, Brandon's exactly right. In so many aspects, Colorado has decided we're going to stand on the side of the criminal and not the victim of the crime. So Brandon is exactly right. When I look at marijuana, I look at the broad social impacts. We study this at the Centennial Institute because oftentimes what you would hear in the debate up to what I call the commercialization of marijuana, not the legalization, the commercialization of marijuana. And that's an important distinction because what we went through in 2012 was, guys, we don't want to put somebody in jail because they have a joint in their pocket. And is it best to fill our jails with all these people that are generally not doing something that's that bad? Well, it wasn't honest, and it was a bit deceitful because what you got as a result of 2012 was the commercialization of an industry. And as somebody who's a conservative, you understand the power of the free market. So what we unleashed upon the people of Colorado was an industry that benefits off of addiction. And because they're free market businesses, they need to go get more consumers. So it wasn't, we're not going to put somebody in jail because they have a joint in their pocket. It is, let's go get as many people addicted to this drug as possible and unleash that upon our community to the point where at one point, guys, we had more pot shops than McDonald's and Starbucks combined in the state of Colorado. So that's one aspect. So you unleash this power of this industry now upon our communities, and they're incentivized to get as many people addicted to it as possible in order to grow their revenue. Then you had, if you remember back then, at one point you could grow 99 plants in your property, and then if you had,
that was for personal use, though. Make sure you're right. It's personal
use.
Yes.
And then it was per person. So if you had 4 people, it was 99 times 4, and cartels were just like, hey, look what we can do. And so they just operated freely here, then shipped it outside the state. So that's another aspect. And then third, anybody that wanted to freely and openly use drugs came to Colorado. And I remember I was talking to law enforcement in Nebraska, and George Brockler and I would travel to help warn other states about this. But law enforcement from Nebraska and Utah would go, hey, we love the fact you guys commercialize marijuana, because it literally emptied our communities of some of the worst people we had to deal with. So Colorado invited all this. Now, Brandon is exactly right. It's not the only thing that has wrecked our state. There's been lots of progressive policies. And to his point, I think the Democrats put in a ton of money with a very specific plan to turn this state blue. But when you look at all that marijuana has brought here, the commercialization was a major factor in the downfall of this state. And the other aspect I'll bring up is financially, it's been a total loser. And we studied this at the Centennial Institute, that for every $1 of tax revenue we brought in, we're spending $4.25 dealing with the effects of it. So this whole idea of, we're going to at least generate revenue. Nah, the black market's still here. The cartels are here. We unleashed a addiction for profit enterprise upon our communities. And then it just brought in a bunch of bad people. So from my take, Colorado commercialized marijuana, and it destroyed our state. Brandon, response?
Yeah. What do you agree and disagree with on that one?
Well, there's a lot there for sure. I think really in talking about the cartels, that's kind of the biggest concern I think a lot of people would have out there is you have these bad actors coming into Colorado, as Jeff said, to take advantage of the system, right? Because Colorado, cannabis, marijuana was legal. They could grow it. They could get it and then take it to other states. And that was definitely an issue, I think. So I'm not saying that marijuana is entirely good, of course. There's challenges, there's problems with everything, just as there is with alcohol, tobacco, anything in our society. There's going to be some pluses and some minuses. But I think that to scapegoat marijuana is kind of to simplify things and to really say that this is a red herring in a way, because we have so many other big issues that we need to focus on, specifically around what our government has done. Jeff talked a lot about drug users. And of course, a lot of people say marijuana is a drug, but it is just a plant. The real drugs in our system and our society here that are causing the major issue, of course, are the fentanyl, the meth, these other types of heavy drugs that are causing even more serious problems. And I think that's an issue we have to kind of distinguish. I mean, we saw Senate Bill 13250 make it a lot easier for drug users to get out of jail. And this, of course, was after the Democrats took over our state legislature. I mean, House Bill 171308, taking away a mandatory urinalysis for people released on parole. I mean, these are the types of things that are causing recidivism in our system, and that's one of the biggest issues here. I mean, we have some push forward with what Michael Fields was doing with the truth in sentencing and trying to keep these violent offenders behind bars. But we've seen in Colorado, the bigger issue, as Advanced Colorado points out, is that violent criminals, on average, are only serving 43% of their sentence. So sure, there's some people out there who are using marijuana and maybe doing some bad things, but ultimately it's the hard drug users and the fact that our criminal justice system is letting them out on the street. And then, you talked about the cartels and some of these immigration issues. Well, we have a sanctuary state here. If we didn't have these types of legislation here, House Bill 1124 back in 2019 was one of the big things. House Bill 1289 in 2022, giving free medical care to illegal immigrants, free driver's licenses, all of these things. We're creating a system. So it's really a bigger issue. I really do think, and I don't know if Jeff would agree with me on this, but if we had a Republican control of the state legislature when marijuana was legalized, would we really see the same kind of problems? Or is marijuana just being scapegoated as kind of this red herring issue because it's so visible, because it's so different, because it's newer to our society? I think those are some of the big questions we need to ask. But ultimately, I think it really comes down to what the Democrats and really what these left-wing progressives have been doing behind the scenes in Colorado for decades now. They've built a long-term infrastructure to really fundamentally shift our political landscape and get their people elected. There's a huge level of investment there. And I'm worried that if we focus so much on marijuana as being the bad guy, we're going to neglect to address the real issues and really understand how we've gotten into the place we are. So I get it. I get Jeff's arguments there. The over commercialization, I'm not too worried about that at this point. Sure, maybe there are some negative aspects of it initially, but you got to think it's a brand new industry that popped up. You got a lot of marijuana tourism, people coming from out of state. Sure, some people smuggling it back to their states. That's going to happen. But at the same time, that market has changed a little bit, I think, over the time that we've seen marijuana legal in Colorado. And we have certain communities who don't allow it. I mean, Colorado Springs up until this last year didn't allow recreational marijuana for sale. We have a lot of communities across Colorado that have said, no, we don't want it here, and other places that do and are taking that tax revenue. And I can understand that there's some maybe negative externalities with the money that Jeff was saying in terms of spent, but ultimately I think I think some of the people who are using marijuana are also going to use harder drugs. Not that marijuana is causing them to use harder drugs. I don't believe that there's this gateway theory that we've all heard about since 100 years ago. But I think, a lot of these people who maybe were attracted to Colorado to get marijuana also were likely to use other hard drugs, end up on the streets, causing some serious issues. But I don't think marijuana in itself, it's almost like, and I don't want to get into too much of this, but it's almost like blaming the gun for gun violence. I think blaming marijuana for the homelessness, for the illegal immigration issues, for the crime issues, for some of the other things I see that are kind of supposedly these outcomes. Because, Jeff had a really good post on X yesterday, and the comments were extremely interesting. People were saying, no, look at the homelessness, look at the crime, look at all of these examples of why marijuana has destroyed Colorado, to agree with Jeff's point. And I said, well, there's other reasons those things have happened. And we got to lay blame where it truly lies, with our state legislature.
Now, that's Brandon Work from Free State, Colorado, joining Jeff and Bill live. We are debating whether or not the commercialization and legalization of marijuana was a negative, a neutral, or a net positive here in our state. One of the things that both of you have talked about is the idea of influencing criminals, bringing the criminal element into our state, and then it being exported. Okay. I want to have both of your opinions on this one. If we talk about national decriminalization, which is what Trump is looking at doing, does that then become a shared risk? Does some of the argument about, hey, all the criminals and all the marijuana tourists are coming to Colorado and doing all these bad things and creating this ecosystem, does that in part disappear or at least dissipate if we have a shared risk when it's decriminalized across the U.S.? Jeff, your thoughts?
Yeah, so what you've seen in California, for instance, is that the black market doesn't go away at all when you decriminalize this. In fact, it gets worse. And let me explain a few reasons why. One, it's a plant. So you can grow the plant, and oftentimes you can grow it in your backyard. And when you commercialize it, you bring in a whole regulatory system on top of it. And so in California, the state actually has to subsidize the legal marijuana industry because the black market is so big. So the idea that if we just commercialize this, decriminalize it, the black market's going to go away, the cartel activity is going to go away. Just by the nature of the regulatory state, you end up having to actually spend a lot more money subsidizing the legal industry, and the black market doesn't go away at all. So that's my response to that.
Yeah, Brandon, your ideas.
I mean, I think the reason we have a black market in California is because the taxes are so high. I mean, I saw things on social media over the years when California kind of moved in the direction Colorado did. The prices were outrageous compared to what they were in Colorado because of the taxes. So, of course, there's going to be a black market. If it's cheaper to buy in the free or black market than it is in a regulated market, of course, the sales are going to move in that direction. So I think California's biggest challenge, our biggest problem, was they overtax things. I mean, we see it, unfortunately, with tobacco in New York, where we see loose cigarettes and other things smuggled into the state because the taxes are so high on it. So it's not surprising. I think the national level decriminalization or commercialization, as Jeff would call it, would be a good thing ultimately. I think it's inevitable. And I think, maybe Jeff would probably agree with me on this, but maybe some of these people here in Colorado would move out of Colorado. Some of the people maybe we don't want to see voting here and move to other places in the country that are a little more affordable, and they can go vote for their left-wing ways out there where we can have a little bit more sanity here in Colorado. So I'd love to see national level decriminalization, national level rescheduling. I think that's inevitable. I think it's going to happen. And I think it's something that needs to happen ultimately because, like Jeff said at the very beginning, we're arresting people for having plants.
So that's Brandon Wark, Free State, Colorado. So this is where I end up driving my more libertarian-minded friends wild. And I'll put this out there. You ready for this statement?
Yes.
You ready?
Yeah.
And watch Brandon. He's going to do his best to control himself. Okay, here I go. Prohibition absolutely works. Okay, and I'm going to explain why. And you're going to, and I'm going to address what Brandon just said about national commercialization of marijuana. Okay, so fentanyl, right? Fentanyl overdose epidemic, what we're facing right now. 105,000 people die a year from fentanyl. Fentanyl is not a legal drug. You can't just buy it on the street. You can't go to the store and buy it. It's made illegally. It's purchased illegally. So 105,000 people that die. This was my main motivation for trying to want to stop the commercialization of marijuana, okay? The amount of people that die from alcohol, which is a legal drug, this is per year, 178,000. Tobacco, 480,000 a year die from tobacco. And people will often go, well, marijuana doesn't kill you the way fentanyl does. Yeah, but neither does tobacco. Tobacco takes 25 years to kill you, and it's killing 480,000 a year. And that's because we commercialize it. If you go back and track tobacco, people weren't dying of lung cancer at rates they were today in the late 1800s. It's because if you wanted to smoke, you had to grow your own tobacco, dry your own tobacco, roll your own tobacco. But the tobacco companies figured out in the 30s and 40s that if they laced it with nicotine, commercialized it, did all the little advertisements, the Marlboro Man, Joe Camel, all those guys, that they could then push this out on an industry, get as many people addicted to it as they could, and lo and behold, 480,000 people a year are dying, and we're spending a tremendous amount of money trying to deal with it. Who's buying up all the marijuana companies right now? The tobacco companies are. This is big tobacco 2.0. It's going to result in a lot of deaths. And when you look at the amount of people dying on illegal drugs versus the amount of people dying on legal drugs, once you commercialize it and legalize it, the amount of death skyrockets. Brandon, I'll let you respond.
Yeah, Brandon, Free State, Colorado. That's Brandon Work joining Jeff and Bill live. Prohibition, does it work?
Well, prohibition is a terrible idea. It's been a disaster. We tried it once with alcohol in this country. I don't think it works with marijuana. I mean, I remember, thankfully I never did any of this type of activity, but I remember in middle school here in Jefferson County in Colorado, kids had marijuana, even elementary school, high school. This was way before it was legal. So, people had it back then just the same. They could get it. It wasn't necessarily any different in terms of youth access to it. If anything now, it's probably a little bit more protected in terms of kids being able to get it because of the strict licensing type of laws, unfortunately, that sometimes go a little too far. But nonetheless, I think the bigger issues with fentanyl, we've seen fentanyl decriminalization here in Colorado, House Bill 19-1263, lowering the schedule on that. But to get to the bigger issue nationwide, I mean, I don't think we want to see a prohibition on tobacco. I don't think we want to see tobacco made illegal, even though 400 and some thousand people die every year. I think we have a beautiful tradition of personal choice and personal responsibility here in our country, and people can make their own decisions. As long as you're not hurting anybody else, you should be able to drink, to smoke, and whether that's tobacco or marijuana. You have that right as an American, I think. There's evidence that our founding fathers smoked marijuana. They separated the hemp seeds based on potency, and there's a lot of tradition there in terms of individuals taking responsibility for themselves and making their own decisions. So yes, people should be informed, people should be educated, they should know what they're getting into, but at the same time, if they want to engage in this behavior, they should 100% be allowed to. And, maybe we're going through a little bit of a blip because marijuana had been illegal for so long here nationally or in the States. Once it does become, legal nationally or decriminalized, there's going to be a little bit of a jump where, maybe people get a little too out of control. But I think it'll stabilize over time and create a situation we'll see a lot closer to the tobacco and alcohol industry. But, I think the restrictions are trying to place on tobacco. In Denver this year, we've seen a flavored tobacco ban. And thankfully, we have people in the industry who are trying to repeal that. And Denver voters here in November 2025 will have an opportunity to repeal the flavored tobacco ban. And I hope they do. Individual adults should have their own choices, their own ability to make their own decisions in terms of enjoying these things. People work so hard, and to say they can't smoke a menthol cigarette or they shouldn't be able to smoke a marijuana joint or have a glass of bourbon after a long day or in their retirement years, I think that's totally un-American. People should have that opportunity and that right to do so. We shouldn't be we need to have a clear understanding of why people should be arrested in our society, for hurting other people, for stealing things, but not for personal use like this, where individuals have that right and that ability to do things. So I think nationwide legalization is inevitable. I think it needs to happen. I think it can alleviate some of the problems we have here in Colorado, and I'm really hopeful that that's the case.
That's Brandon Work from Free State, Colorado, joining Jeff and Bill live. Yesterday, Jeff sent out a tweet, because I refuse to call it X, that basically said that legalization of marijuana in Colorado ruined the state. Brandon disagreed. That's why he's been kind enough to join us, so early at 6 o'clock in the morning. Before he does his real job later in the day, we sure appreciate his time. Now, gentlemen, we just talked a little bit about prohibition. Both of you have used the example of marijuana and also fentanyl. I want to delineate between the two because fentanyl's never been legal while marijuana is. The question I have is, can we put the genie back in the bottle? We have historical reference points for where we tried to prohibit alcohol. Once it was legal, would we experience the same thing? Would it be the same Sisyphean, I guess it'd be not Sisyphean, exercise of pushing that boulder up the hill only to have it roll back down on us again? Jeff Hunt, if prohibition works, can we put the genie back in the bottle with marijuana? Can we make it illegal again?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Well, you can at least restrict it in a lot greater ways than we're doing right now, because part of the problem with the discussion about marijuana is the assumptions baked into it. The idea that we're somehow smoking ditchweed from the 1960s. This is an industry that's now become highly devoted to chemical analysis and building high potency pot. So the THC concentration of what I smoked in middle school, what other people may have smoked, was probably roughly around 8, 9, 10% THC. You now have high potency pot around 99% THC potency. It's highly addictive. It's like a crack cocaine version of marijuana. And in Colorado, we're just like, go for it. Do we know what this is going to do to you? Nah, but feel free to go out and manufacture it and sell it to people. And so can you put restrictions on it? Sure, absolutely. And reduce that potency and try to get it down out of public health. I think part of the challenge I have with the libertarian approach on all this is the built-in assumption as well that the decisions you make individually don't affect anybody else. So when we've had a dramatic increase of, for instance, marijuana-related traffic fatalities in Colorado since the commercialization of drugs, we as a community pay for that. When construction companies can't hire anybody because so many people are using marijuana and won't pass a drug test, and it becomes a big challenge for the construction industry, we end up paying for that. When kids don't graduate high school and perform poorly as a result of early use marijuana, we pay for that as a community. And when people have health problems related to marijuana use, we pay for it as a community. So on one hand, they kind of live in this individualistic world of finishing your job and going to have a joint and a cigarette and a little bit of bourbon. And the reality is, when all those consequences of that individual decisions end up falling on the rest of us, then yeah, it's a problem we got to address. And you do that through some form of regulation. Now, does it mean we have all forms of regulation? Do I want to see any type of medical benefit of marijuana reduced? No, not necessarily. But the full commercialization of high potency pot forced upon our communities, it has more problems than benefits.
Now, Brandon Work from Free State, Colorado will get to you in just a second. I want to follow up just for a moment with Jeff. Now, if we do identify these products and this behavior as negative in society, having negative impacts on both the individual and on the larger community, what other products then can we go and prohibit?
Sure.
Could we see the Democrats here in Colorado try to prohibit tobacco, alcohol, and their favorite, firearms, using your same logic? Could they do that?
One of them is a constitutionally protected right. The others are not. And that's a very, very important distinction, right? And so that's going to affect our policy, our law. So I think when you look at drugs.
If it's a danger, if we identify it as a danger to the community, then what do we do with it? What do we do?
Well, you address the danger, but you have to do so within law and with the constitutional protections. I don't see a problem with that. I mean, for instance, driving a car is a privilege. Owning a gun is a constitutionally protected right. They can have different restrictions put on them based upon that understanding in our legal system.
But to be fair, the Second Amendment does place a restriction on the gun ownership as well. Just to the first.
Yeah. We're getting that debate.
Yeah, but it's in
Brandon
the
doesn't know that. It's like a daily debate here as to what the Second Amendment says. But let's get back to Brandon Work.
Brandon, okay, let's go back. Brandon Work is joining us from Free State, Colorado, based on a tweet that Jeff had yesterday talking about the legalization of marijuana ruining Colorado. Jeff says it did. Brandon disagrees, comes at it from a more libertarian idea. So let's go back to prohibition. If prohibition works, as Jeff says, you disagree, Brandon. Do you think that we could put the genie back in the bottle? Is there a way that we could functionally make marijuana illegal again, or at least restrict access or potency, as Jeff outlined? What do you think?
Absolutely not. I mean, living in a democratic society, a society where we have a rule by the people, legal marijuana in Colorado is widely popular. It's just as popular as it was back when it passed in 2012 with Amendment 64. It's probably even more popular now, recent surveys show. And there's actually a 2020 survey, the Healthy Kids Colorado survey, that showed that child use of marijuana has not increased substantially since legalization. So I think that's a total falsehood there, that children have been using marijuana more often. I don't think that's reality. Since this 2020 survey shows. But I think prohibition is going to fail ultimately, because half the country has on some form or another legalized marijuana. We're talking about the national level. It's closer than ever. It's not going to happen. The people like it. The people want it. And thankfully, we have a system in which the people can put stuff on the ballot. Here in Colorado, we have the citizen initiative process. And if there was any attempt, like there has been from the state legislature or other anti-marijuana people, to try and change Amendment 64, repeal it or restrict it, I think the voters would be totally opposed to it. I mean, we've seen attempts. In 2016, there was a ballot proposal to try and limit the potency at 16% THC. And I know that's Jeff and a lot of other people's big talking points there, saying this isn't the same marijuana that was around in the 60s, right? This is a more highly potent, concentrated form. And the benefit to that, talking to some friends of mine who are in their older years, who have been around in the 60s compared to now, the benefit to the high potency stuff is you don't have to smoke as much, right? Back then in the 60s and the 70s, they had to smoke quite a bit. And we see the same thing with tobacco, with these arbitrary nicotine caps that they put on there, where you got to smoke twice as much to have the same effect. So if Jeff or other people get their way and want to have high potency caps here in Colorado, you're just going to see people smoking twice as much, potentially causing more damage to their lungs, causing other serious issues, because they have to spend even more money at these marijuana dispensaries to get the same kind of hit they would if they would have just been able to buy what the free market provides. So I mean, the potency thing, I think that's kind of a moving in the wrong direction. I think it would create the opposite effect that Jeff and others think, where you have people using it more and more to get that same effect. So I think that's something we definitely don't want to see. We've seen some attempts here at the state legislature, of course, to try and go after legal marijuana, and I think the voters are going to ultimately oppose any type of effort to repeal Amendment 64. And I think, we got to move in the direction of freedom. And I know Jeff would agree with me to say Colorado needs a new era of personal responsibility, where individuals take responsibility for their own lives, and we don't have the government coming in and saying, we're here to protect you. We're here to tell you what's right. We're going to cap marijuana. We're going to cap tobacco. We're going to tell you what you can and can't drink. We don't need that. We can be responsible adults making our own decisions. And sure, not everybody's a responsible adult, but we have to live in a society where people are treated as adults, as individuals who are capable of making those decisions. If we ever want people to take responsibility for their own lives, we have to give them that ability to be responsible for their own lives, and not have politicians, bureaucrats, or other interested parties coming in and trying to tell them what they can and can't do.
That's Brandon Work from Free State, Colorado. Now, Brandon, I got to give you credit for a novel approach. I'm not saying it's bad, just hadn't heard it before. The idea that the increased potency leads to less consumption based on the idea of what it takes to get you high. Again, high five on the idea it's novel. Hadn't run across that one before. I'm not taking an opinion, yes or no on it. I'm just like, that's cool. I don't often run across new arguments inside of this space. That's really cool, man. It's high five on that one. Okay, now I want to follow up a little bit on the same thing that I did with Jeff. What about the arguments for vast legalization or the lack of prohibition that you just made? I'm going the opposite of Jeff. The idea of not having any restrictions, could we then make that on tobacco, alcohol, and even firearms, even going as far as drugs? So the idea of if it's about individual choice, would you then expand legalization to something like fentanyl? If it's about choices, could we then expand our access to firearms and have something like an RPGs or bazookas if it's more about a libertarian individual responsibility and choices? How do you square that circle?
I think that's the ideal that we're trying to live up to here by creating a free state of Colorado, is trying to create a situation in which individuals have those kind of responsibilities and ability to do what they want, as long as you don't hurt anybody else. I mean, that's kind of the libertarian ethos in a way. But ultimately, I don't think that maybe the fentanyl issue is not a winning issue that people should be focusing on trying to get.
Yeah, probably.
We did see, we did see the ballot measure pass for the psychedelic ballot initiative pass just a couple years ago. That's going to be rolling out here in Colorado. So, all this time we've been talking about marijuana, and now there's this natural medicine coming out here. So November 2022, voters passed Proposition 122, the Natural Medicine Health Act. So we're going to see, DMT, ibogaine, mescaline, psilocybin, psilocin. I mean, there's recent articles about some of these mushrooms being sold in gas stations and other places. So this is where it's kind of moving towards, where this natural medicine is going to become the next big marijuana. We're going to see a lot of people coming after it. I'm sure we'll see some tweets from Jeff about it as well. But ultimately, I think the voters are okay with the idea of natural medicines, whether it's marijuana, whether it's these other things, these natural things that I just listed. I mean, the voters approve that. They want that. So I think we're moving in that direction.
Why natural? Why is that? I mean, opium's natural.
On a side note here, the idea that we are going to allow ourselves to self-medicate based on choices at a gas station.
Yeah, right.
The irony there alone. Have you seen the food choices and nutrition choices we have there to begin with?
That's an important question. So one, why natural? And then two, should you be able to buy meth at a gas station?
Hey, we should be able to buy our guns, our tobacco, our alcohol at a gas station. There should be a convenience store. The ATF should be a convenience store, not a government agency. We can get to an era, to a point in our society where people are able to make these decisions and be free. Ultimately, that's what it's about. People want freedom, both on the left and the right. They all claim they want freedom. And it's not necessarily pretty. Of course, there's going to be a few issues here and there, but ultimately people deserve that. They have the right to it. And I think the big question of natural versus made in a lab is that, hey, if it's created, it's a natural part of our world. God created it. Individuals want to be able to have that right to say, hey, this is a plant growing out in the ground. I can go pick it, do what I want with it. How can any government have the justification, the authority to restrict somebody from doing that, to say, no, that plant is off limits over there? It's like, come on, this is a plant that's naturally occurring. It's existed long before the government has. And we have that right as human beings to cultivate the earth and to see what we find in it. And some of the stuff's good, some of it's poison. But, we ultimately have to make those choices and those experiments and see what works, what doesn't.
Brandon Work from Free State, Colorado, joining Jeff and Bill live. I appreciate your idea about what should be available at the gas stations, but over the course of my decades on this planet Earth and road trips, I've never come across an individual, myself included, that has walked out of the gas station thinking, I have just made a great purchasing choice here. I've made a quality decision-making process here on my nutrition, where I've chose to relieve myself, where a whole bunch of things. I'm just saying that gas stations are not necessarily where we make the best choices in life. Just saying. It's,
We got a lot of text messages coming in, one reminding us that syphilis is also natural. Brandon, it was a lot of fun.
Yes,
I think
great.
We're both committed to liberty. I mean, I would say at a certain point, maybe it sounds like there's a little bit of restrictions you're willing to put on things. Maybe no fentanyl and meth at the gas stations, but maybe not. I don't know.
No, just in those gumball machines, so you got a chance.
Yeah, the prohibition. Yeah, I think there's levels of prohibition, but this was a fun debate. I know fantastic. A lot of people were watching this, and what I appreciate, Brandon, about this is something that the other side never does. Yeah. There's like literally no debate ever. They all are in lockstep, but we as principled people who believe in different, visions for our communities are willing to get together and debate it, especially at 6 a.m. before the coffee kicks in.
Hell yeah.
Brandon, you're a real champ. Appreciate it, my friend.
You are a rock star. Hope we can do this again, man. Thank you so much for your time. You've been more than generous. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you very much. And I'm actually running for city council in Greeley this year, electbrandonwork.com. And of course, check out freestatecolorado.com, X, YouTube, Facebook, and Telegram. Put out a new video this morning about the food stamp snap changes here. It should be a lot of fun, so check that out. But thank you guys, really appreciate it.
I bet that's another one we disagree on, too.
We'll have to do this,
cut off the sugary food.
And again, your presentation, Brandon, what you're doing online, what you're doing as far as video, your presentation is rock solid, man. You're doing a really good job. Keep it up out there. There are very few people out there that rise to the level of professionalism and presentation that you do. Nicely done. We appreciate your time today, and keep up the good work at Free State, Colorado.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, we've got You Choose the News coming up. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Jeff and Bill Show. We'll discuss the debate. We'll take your calls and texts. Did the commercialization, legalization of marijuana harm Colorado? Is that part of the problems we have right now? Was that decision made in 2012 by voters? Would love to hear from you. 303-696-1971 or text us at 720-819-5115. But now it's time for a little bit of levity with You Choose the News.
Yes, it's that portion of the morning where we get to make questionable choices. It's You Choose the News. It's time for America's favorite fake radio news game show. Yeah, I browsed the interwebs for moments this morning to find really dumb stories about us humans. I have them here in my hand, and then I give them even more ridiculous headlines. Why would we do something this silly and stupid this early in the morning? Well, when Jeff and I are left unsupervised, no, you have no idea the stories we could tell you. Some of them involve the police and scarring, but that's for another day, maybe a Friday. But this is why we do it. Nobody in charge here at 710 KNUS wakes up until 7 a.m., so we are going to take full advantage of being left unsupervised. And as always, we persuade somebody else to participate in our bad behavior. That is Blake Olson, who joins us from the news department. Gentlemen, your choices this morning are as follows. Headline number 1, give this man a hand. Headline number 2, shared workspace. Headline number 3, what's your question? And headline number 4, new employment expansion. Mr. Hunt, your choice.
Shared workspace, please.
Yeah, shared workspace. Now, there is getting cozy at Starbucks, catching up on your email, hanging out with friends, maybe visiting and then dropping some likes on the social medias. But Starbucks in South Korea is experiencing a boom in a phenomenon of where people are actually showing up to work at Starbucks. No. This isn't your struggling writer trying to finish his script. No, nothing like that. You're not just making sure you can do that Excel spreadsheet. No, people are showing up at Starbucks in South Korea with full-on desks like printers, whole bunch of other stuff in order to bring in. So South Korea,
I
Starbucks.
hate the smell I have after spending time in a coffee shop.
Oh, yeah.
I go home and I'm like, oh, I sting. Why would you want to spend all day there?
Free Wi-Fi. That's pretty much what it is. Free Wi-Fi and the coffee is right over there. So Starbucks in Korea has updated their policy saying you can have a pleasant, accessible store experience, but they're only going to allow laptops and smaller personal devices. Stop bringing in your desktop computer. You don't need 3 screens, and you, God forbid, do not need to bring your printer. Yes, so they don't let you bring those in anymore. Now, Starbucks has been a fixture in South Korea since opening their first store there in Seoul in 1999. So it's kind of a hub, and there is kind of an idea of that shared workspace in the culture in Asian communities. So it's kind of a weird thing. But we'll talk about it some more, possibly, depending on Blake's choice. Blake, your headline, sir. Give this man a hand. What's your question? Or new employment expansion?
What's your question?
Yeah, what's your question? And now, if you are seeking some medical advice during routine checkups, well, that just might cost you more this time. Yes, don't ask your doctor any questions. That's what Whitney Darnell found out when she recently went for an annual physical. She was surprised by a sign on the wall at her doctor's office. She took a picture of it, and it's going viral on the social medias. It says, quote, please be advised that additional charges may be applied if any issues outside the regular examination are discussed during your annual visit. Yes. So the idea is if you're in there for something, you say, hey, doc, it also hurts when I do this. That's a fee. And if you talk about it.
That'll be $150.
Exactly. So again, that means when you're making your appointment at the doctor's office, you better put in all the symptoms. Just say, I want to come in because this and this and this and this.
Think about how far we've come from the doctor that would show up at your house and was your neighbor and, made the visits, the house visits.
Yeah. Obamacare.
Now we're charged by the question.
Yes, you're going to be charged by the question. Yes. Right. But again, only if you make it and it's not about what you made the appointment for. So if it's like you have a broken arm and you go in there and ask about, why is my toe also hurt, then it's, that's the problem.
We used to pay our medical bills with eggs, as a society. Anyways,
all right.
I know we gotta get to the next
Final choice, Jeff. Give this man a hand or new employment expansion.
New employment expansion.
New employment expansion. Well, how would you like to pay to go to work? Unemployment rates in younger kids is so high in China, up to 14%. They are now paying to go to work. They're paying companies to allow them to use the shared workspace, so it looks like they're going to work. But while they're there, they're searching for jobs. So yes. Don't tell the companies here, otherwise we're going to make
Communism rocks. All right, you're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is 710 KNUS.